Okay, this works. Okay, we have people joining. Can you hear me well? Yeah, awesome. Okay, let's go right into it because we have a lot of things to go through and not a lot of time. So hello, everyone. Really nice seeing you today here, our panelists and our attendees. I cannot see you, but I know you're there. So before we start, like, as you know, the purpose of this event is to discuss data science. We have a structure for this event, but we also are gonna have time in the end for questions. So please, if you have any questions, put them in the Q&A function, and we're gonna make sure to go through all of them. Before we go into question, we will have an intro into data science, and then we'll have a live coding session analyzing the salary data in tech in Europe. And yeah, we'll then go through some questions that we have, and we'll take any questions from the attendees also. Sounds good? Perfect. So awesome. Before we go, just to introduce myself, I'm going to be the facilitator for today. I am the director of educational products at CodeUp, and I have a background in software engineering. I haven't worked so much with data, but I'm very excited to find more about it because I think it's a very important part of the whole tech industry, and it's getting more and more traction. So I think this is the place to be. So I'm as excited as you all for this event. Before we start, just to give you a little bit of information about CodeUp. As you know, CodeUp is an international tech school that offers courses for women, transgender, and non-binary people. We are dedicated to changing the culture of tech, and we focus on providing our students with a safe space, support, training, and community that they need in order to become leaders in their field. Part of that work, it's also organizing events like this one. So this is why we're here today. I would like to start by getting an introduction on our speakers, and I will allow them to do that because they can do a better job than me. So I'll go through the order that I have on my screen, and maybe you can, Mignon, Carmen, and Antonio, you can go one by one and kind of give a little bit of information about your background and how did you get into data and what do you like about it. Yes, so I have Mignon here first. Go.
Hi, my name is Mignon, and I have been trained as an econometrician. What that is I try to study people's decision using the data, and I use economic data to analyze what's going on and how do people make decisions. I have been starting to think about transitioning into maybe doing some more business case problems. And the main reason is because the data available in the industry now is very, very exciting. And I think the places that has the biggest data are probably the ones that are leading in the industry. So I've been studying and kind of transitioning into the industry data and then starting to look for some more exciting data to think about it. But I also am trying really hard to make sure that I focus on the training that I have, which is to think about causal relationships in the data. So the machine learning part is very, very cool, but I also am very interested in doing causal inference and decision science generally. And I'll talk a little bit about what I view as data science later on before we start live coding about the salary data. So I'm happy to talk more then.
Awesome, thank you, Mignon. Carmen, maybe you can go next.
Sure, yeah. So my name is Carmen. I was born and raised here in Barcelona. I'm a senior data scientist right now working at Typeform. I started my journey as a PhD student doing oceanography and physics. So it was quite a long way for me. For the past, let me think, 10 years, I've been, 12 years maybe, I've been working with time series, trying to analyze the series, predict some events, causality, as Mignon said. And also, even when machine learning was not a trending topic, I was building models, trying to predict what's going to happen next and how to actually work with data and get insights from it. After my academic studies, I decided to move further from the academia and transition into the private sector. From the past 5 years, 6 years, I've been working as data scientist first in the consultancy firm, then in the retail sector, and then I moved into web applications, let's say. Since I joined Typeform a couple of months ago, and I'm super happy to be here, actually sharing with you what being a data scientist means, and what can we extract from our learnings, and hopefully give you a better understanding what the field is about, and motivating you all to join us at some point.
Awesome, happy to have you here also. Okay, Antonia, you want to go next?
Yes, my name is Antonia, as you said. I've been a data scientist for 2 months and a half for now, so I'm very junior. But I am a physicist by training, but I've been doing lots of things in my life. I first started in web development like 15 years ago. Then I went to the special effects industry, and I was a special effects artist for 7 years. And then I had a daughter, so I've been like 9 years unemployed. And when I wanted to restart my career, I really didn't know what to do. So I started to research which field in tech will be best suited for me, because I don't wanted to go back to the movie industry. It was a lot of crunches and a lot of long hours. So I just researched it through Python, because I was a Python developer, and I found this exciting field, is the data analysis and data science. And that's it. I made the CodeOp program, and in April I started to search for a job, and in August I was starting to working as a data scientist. Now I'm working at Expert AI, where we develop mobile apps, and the data science team analyzes all the data yielded by the app. And also we have a very cool spam detector right now. We're working in production. And that's it.
Awesome, thank you for sharing that. We're happy we are part of your journey of becoming a data scientist, which is, I think, it's pretty cool. Okay, so we've been talking about data science, but we haven't actually said what is it, what it's doing. Like, each one of you have been presenting a little bit about what you're doing in the day-to-day and how does this fit into the role. But we have Mignon here, which is going to give us an introduction in exactly what data science is and what exactly the role is. And then we move forward to the live coding session.
Yeah, that sounds good. So so data science is a big field, obviously, and it's been used interchangeably. So I will describe the way that I understand it, which is, I think, more likely like what people are thinking about. And the best actually diagram that I want to share is this in terms of data science. And so data science is a field that probably people have been thinking about, but I think the best way to describe it is that it's an intersection between math and computer science, and then business expertise. So if you're a computer scientist and just want to work in an industry or any kind of technology industry kind of job, you're more likely to be called software engineer. It could be front end, back end, but I think the term that people use is software engineer. If you're just doing computer sciences, mathematical and statistics, you're more likely to be machine learning engineer. You're still going to be engineering some kind of pipeline. And there's data analysis, which is the business versus math that you're just kind of thinking about. And data scientists is kind of in the middle, and they do have to do all of them. And in my opinion, the reason that data scientists are in the middle is because we are the people who are trying to extract information from data. And to me, the ultimate goal of having the data science and having that insight is to make better decisions. And it could be the decision of the businesses, it could be the decision of the people. And at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is we're trying to understand how humans behave. And at the end of the day, is there some kind of thing that we can make a better decisions about? To do that, the reason that we need all of those other components is because, like I said, the exciting data is at the tech companies these days, because they're the ones who's collecting the data. And the way to get to that needs a lot of engineering required. So you do have to work closely with engineers who's trying to give you a way to process the data in a way. And on top of that, as a data scientist, you do have to think about how the data is generated. So without the understanding of how the engineering side works, it's hard to understand how the data is generated. So that's the computer science part of it. You need a really good, solid background in mathematics and statistics, because the way that we're analyzing data is based on statistical theory. So one good example is we assume that a lot of the things in life is normally distributed. And what that means is that there's very few people who are at the both end of like the edge cases, and most of the people are kind of similar to each other. So a good example is most of the people are around 160 centimeters of height, and there's only 2 people who are like 2 meters, and there's only 2 people who are 140. So those kind of assumptions that we implicitly think about are embedded in analyzing. So without having an understanding of mathematics, it's kind of hard to understand how we're going to gain an insight. So that's where the mathematics comes from. But at the end of the day, the biggest question is, why are we doing this? And a lot of, if we can do this to gain the insights so that we can help businesses, we can help decision makers, we can help the consumers make a better decision, that's the best, right? So the really, really well-trained data scientists, I think, are the ones who are really good communicators as well. And those are the people who can answer very bottom underlying questions called like, so what? So we have this insight, so what do we do about it, right? So there's a lot of these interesting things that's coming into together to become to make somebody a good data scientist. And at the end of the day, if you're a good data scientist, I think it's one of the more interesting jobs that you can have. And obviously it's biased because I am in that field. So that gets me excited. So one of the things that I thought would be an interesting introduction for all of you is to think about, okay, if that's the case, let's think about one of the most interested question, which is how much salary does data scientists get, or the people in the tech get? And because we are doing data science, we can do some analysis on how that salary is working. So I searched online for a little bit, and I decided that there could be a little bit of an analysis that could be done. So I'm happy to do the analysis with you, and also talk about where I got the data and just like overall how I would be thinking about as a data scientist to tackle this problem. So I'm going to use the salary data from this references. So there's many places that you can get the data, but many of these data that are available by the government and other places doesn't have that implicit code called data science. So the way that I thought was that the survey data is more appropriate because these are the particular people who selected to work in the tech sector. And also in this particular survey that this German blogger has posted is actually particularly for the data scientists, for the software engineers and people who are at the tech. So this data is compared to what's going on in the world, very, very biased sample towards people who are working at the tech companies. But I thought for the purposes of what we're trying to get, this is a good place to just look at. But again, as a data scientist, you have to understand where the data is coming from and make sure that the data that you're getting is credible. So I'm also comparing that with the Glassdoor salary data to make sure that overall that range is making sense and doing some kind of a sanity check. So I am looking at this website called asdcode.de. So this is a German site. So the data is going to be mostly in the German area. And happy to look into Spanish data if I can find one, but I wasn't able to find it so far. So from here, they are doing the survey, same thing for many years now. So it's been 4 years. And I'm looking at the 2021 because it's the most recent one. It's probably the closest to the environment that you guys are going to be exposed to, because now this by 2020, I think everybody has gone into doing the remote, and there's a lot of things going on in 2022. I'm happy to also look at the 2019 on a different day, but today we're just going to focus on 2020. So I did a little bit of an initial cleaning, because when I looked at the data, there's some outlier edge cases where people are telling me that they are making $1 million a year, but they didn't also tell me which job that they were doing. It says head, and I just thought that it was spurious data. I didn't believe it. And also, it's not really relevant to us because we want to look at what most people are doing instead of this one person. So there are a couple of cases like that. There are a couple of cases where the data wasn't really readable. So I did some of the data cleaning there. So if you download exactly the same data, you might not see exactly the same thing, but you'll see that overall it's going to be the same, but I got rid of maybe like 10 to 15 data points, just to be clear. So I'm downloading this data. So I'm downloading this data from this particular article. And then they did their own kind of analysis, but we're going to do it together. So I'm just going to go all the way down to the end of the thing. And then they have the data from the survey they have. And I'll show you how the data looks like. So the survey has been asked. So there's a timestamp for when the survey was submitted. And then they're asking how old you are, what gender you are, which city that you live in, what position you're working on, either software engineer, mobile developer, data scientist, and number of experience, like how many years do you have an experience in a relative field? What level are you in? Are you in senior level, lead, junior? And what kind of programming language that you use? But this is harder to kind of parse it out, because if you use multiple languages, as a lot of the developers do, they use multiple languages, you have to parse it out. So this is something that we can play around with, but having that in mind. Other languages and software, the data that we're interested in, which is salary. We also have bonus questions, bonus. And then we also have a salary from last year, and then the bonus from last year. So we can also observe how much of an increase that you can get. And the other thing is number of vacation days. And then main language of work, we also have that information. So it's a pretty short survey. And the number of respondents that I have after cleaning some of the data, I have more than 1,200. So I have more than 1,000 respondents who's giving me the data for, which is not small. And this is good enough for a lot of the analysis that we'll be doing. So what I'm first wanting to be looking at and align with CodeUp's mission is to see whether there's it's a representative sample of the world in terms of gender. So if I look at the gender, and if I just make a pie chart, out of the 100%, there's 0.2% who's identifying not as either male or female, but out of the 99.8%, 84% of them are male. So obviously this already tells you how biased this sample is. And it could be that the people who are selected to do this survey are mostly male, or it could be that this is actually a good representation of the tech sector. We wouldn't actually know, and I'm happy to have Carmen and Antonia tell me about the like your workplaces and what the percentages are. I don't think it's going to be as stark as these, but it could be the case. But having in mind, these are all the jobs in tech, not just data scientists, it's just software engineer, backend developer, all of them. So as we go into the data science section, I will also talk a little bit more about what the gender dynamic looks like for data scientists. But this is all the tech sectors who's ever responded to the survey. And then I wanted to see like, okay, so what's it like, where are they located? Because obviously the salary data depends a lot on the location that you're in. And this particular survey, partly because it's a German blogger, it is mostly from Germany. And most of the jobs or the surveys are done in Berlin. Some in Munich, some in Frankfurt. But Barcelona, I think there's only few. Let's check whether there's more than people. So let's see if there is a person who can check. So let's see, different city equal to Barcelona. And then see if we have. How many of them are there? We only have 2, unfortunately. So both of them are data scientists, interestingly. And then we have that salary information for Barcelona. And if you want to check Barcelona salary data scientist, Spain, let's check to see whether this makes sense. So on average, they're getting about 40,000 from Glassdoor. This salary information is, one is about 40,000, the other one is about 11,000. And this is a junior position, this is a senior position. So it's only 2, so it's very hard to make any kind of distributional assumptions about it, but this is where we are. I don't personally think that they're lying for these 2 cases, but let's look at the Germany cases just because they have a lot more people, and we're just gonna look at everybody in this sample. So if you also look at the pie chart the same way, which cities are mostly there? Obviously Berlin and Munich is mostly there. And if you want also to see the percentage of the people, we can also print that out here. Which means I have to do this. So we can see that Berlin is 65%, Munich is 23%, and you get to see that most of the people who are responding to this thing is in Berlin. And if anybody's interested, they're welcome to start the survey and I'll do the analysis for you. I'm very interested in about Barcelona as well. So, okay, so this is entire tech sector. So I want to see what kind of jobs they're holding for the people who responded to this survey. And what I wanted to see is just the top 15 positions that they said that they're working on. And here, most of the respondents are coming from software engineering, and the other one is from backend developer. And my guess is backend developer and software engineer could be kind of interchangeable depending on the date. And then the next one is data scientist. There's 114 respondents for data scientists, and 2 of them are from Barcelona, and most of them are probably from Berlin and Munich as well. And there's front-end developer. There's also ML engineer, which could be also sometimes data scientists are looking for. So I'm going to use data scientist and ML engineer as my sample to look at the salary for the data science in general. Because once you do data scientist, that ML engineer is actually at the product line where they're working with the engineers to make sure that the machine learning and data science models that you've developed are being deployed. So we're going to look at both of them. Sometimes data engineer could be the case. So we can put in, but not put in, but there's only 25. So I've actually just stopped at including data science and ML engineer. But please write it on the chat if you want to see different denominations of things. I can actually just put that in. It's very easy for me to change the code. So this is a good thing about live coding session. Please just have a Q&A questions typed in as a Q&A session, and I'll just do the live session there too. Okay, so that's good. So what I wanted to I'm just visualizing it, but I think this is pretty clear about how many people are doing what, so maybe the visualization wasn't really needed. So now what I wanted to do is like, okay, that's great. So let's look at the salary data to see if it's kind of feasible and not feasible, it makes sense, if it's like sensible. So what I'm doing is I'm actually doing something called, so I'm creating a distribution of the salary. So what that means is what's the minimum salary that I have in this data set? What's the maximum salary that I have in this data set? What's in the middle? And what's the 25th percentile? And what's at the 75th percentile? So you get to kind of see. And visually, this basically translates into something like this, where the y-axis is this number of people who have this particular salary. So for example, there's a lot of people, like, I don't know, like 60 plus 80 plus 100 plus 130 plus 145. Most of the people are getting salary somewhere between 50,000 to 100,000. So if you are in this particular data set, you're likely to be, your probability of being involved in this area is going to be high. So you're going to probably get somewhere between 50 to 100,000. But because there's a lot of people who have different years of experience, that could vary depending on the experience. There's a lot of other conditionings that you can do to get to answering exact questions that you want to answer. So please put it onto the Q&A session and I'm happy to go over it. But at the moment, this is kind of how this thing looks like. And then you see the blue line that I created. This is actually what's called distribution. If it looks like there's like one hump, it's called normal distribution, more or less. This one is skewed normal, where there's a couple people, maybe probably one person who's making 300,000. And my guess is this is like a director of data science and there's only one position for one company kind of a thing. But most people probably will be around here in Germany most of the times. And keep that in mind. Every city has a different standard of living. Every city has a different salary expectation. So it'll be different for Germany. So this is good. That's nice. So what I wanted to do is the same way that I'm checking the salary data for Barcelona, I'm also going to check it with Glassdoor to cross-reference whether this distribution makes sense to me, right? Because this is the survey data. You always have to be very skeptical about where this data is coming from. So here I'm just going to do the same thing. Glassdoor. What am I doing? Glassdoor, Berlin, data science, salaries. If you do that, it's going to be about 60,000 euros, which more or less is okay. And this is low is at 47,000 and high is at 77. So I think that kind of goes well with our story here, where like low is at 47 and high is at 77. So I think it's more or less around here is what's being reported. So maybe it's a little bit higher than what Glassdoor's reporting is, like slightly, but I don't think it's something to be super alarmed about. So that's kind of where it is now. It's like, okay, so there's some credibility to go further into looking at this. So I'm just going to put and scope the entire data set down into data scientists and machine learning engineers only. So what I'm doing is I'm creating a new data set from the original data set that had 1,200 respondents. I'm actually only looking at the people who have a data scientist title or ML engineer title. And I can add, for example, I could probably add somebody that has the data engineer title. So maybe we can add that here just so that we can increase the number by 25, like we said. So this was data engineer, I think. Okay, that worked. So if you look at that, we have 180. So we only have 180, and let's check the numbers here. So we had 114 data scientists, 41 engineers for ML, and then 25 data engineers. So 114 plus 41 plus 25, it's about 180. So that makes sense. We did a good job at identifying everyone. So here, what I did here is, okay, so that there are either data engineer, data scientist, data engineer, all of them. These are number of experiences, seniority level, bunch of these things. It's like, okay, so the first question that we were asking is that how many female are working in this environment? Is that actually a little bit different from software engineer? Do we have to worry about this? So I am creating exactly the same graph with this new data set called data frame, data science here. And I'm looking at the percentage of this respondent out of 180 people, 78, about 80% of the data scientists are male and 20% are female. So I think we still could do a little bit of work to push some of the women into the data science world, and I'm happy to help in any way that I can. And then, so let's look at the salary for data scientists compared to the entire sample as well. So I'm gonna create the same graph for the salary for the data scientist or data engineer or machine learning engineer. And it will be looking somewhat similar. So the mean is around somewhere, I think it's a little bit left to the software engineer, but not too much. So it starts from 25 all the way to 200,000. My guess is this is a senior person, and we'll actually look at that as well. So here you do in the middle, I think it's very likely that you're going to get somewhere around 50,000 to 60,000 is probably the best guess if you are becoming a data scientist at any given time. So not just junior, not just senior, but any given time, this is more likely the case that you're doing. Is there a pay gap is another question that we can ask between the men and the women. And it seems to me though, thankfully, I don't think that is the case. We have a lot less. So the reason the female is down here is because we just have a lot less women. So the count is a lot less than male, but we do get to see that the female is actually, the shape looks kind of the same. So even if you're a female, even if you have a smaller number, I don't think there's a huge salary difference, at least in the respondents of the people who are here. And my guess is most of the people here are working in a tech sector. The fact that you are exposed to do this survey to begin with, which I think was, posted on Reddit, but also other places, that means you probably have an exposure to a tech sector. This is the people. And then the gap is not quite there, although it's interesting to see how that goes in the later places. But to me, at least from this data, it's not too much of a concern. We just have to push more people in there, at least from this data. And then the next thing I wanted to do is but this is a salary for any given time. So if you're thinking about a junior position, the salary might be different. And you probably want to see how the salary is moving up as you go more and more to the top. So that's what I'm going to do next here, which is I'm just going to get the number of, this is the graph that I'm looking at here, which is, this is the total years of experience. So you can call yourself junior, you can call yourself senior, but I thought what's more interesting is once you get a job, as you move on and work on that sector, how much of your salary increases over time is an interesting thing to look at. So what I looked at here is to look at what your salary is going to be when you're starting as a first year, and then second year, and the third year, and the fourth year. But this has its own shortcomings about this particular graph, because we only have 180 data points, and this is already divided into 10 different things. So there could be only one or two people in this entire data set. So if that person has a 60,000 salary and then she's the only person who has 1 year of experience, then that's the salary. That's not a representation of a lot of people. It's just a one person's case. So that's not a good statistic, unfortunately. So you'll see a lot of that. And that's the downside of this particular data set, because we only have 180. A good side of this data set is it's labeled exactly the way that we want to see. So we want data scientists, we want to see how many years they've worked on. But then the downside is that it's not a huge number of data sets like you would see in any kind of administrative data, for example. So that's unfortunate, but let's kind of see more or less the trend is that you will get somewhere between $50,000 to $100,000 or $75,000 within the first 5 to 6 years of your career. And then once you go into the 10 and 20 years of career, it's really hard to tell because there's not many people here. So what we can see actually is how many people are in each of these segments. So let's look at that. So I'm gonna look at the total years of experience. And then I'm gonna see how many of them are there. And I'm also going to sort values, ascending, false. Okay. I have to sort the index. I'm wondering whether you can do sort index. I have never done this, so it might not be the case. This works. Okay, so let's ascend it. Okay. So we have a lot of data so we have 10 people for these two groups. So my guess is only 1 or 2 of them are female and 8 of them are male, and that makes sense. And then there's 24 people who's been working in data science for 2 years. There are actually 13 of them that's been working in 10 years, and that's all male. So 10 years ago, if you got a job as a data scientist 10 years ago, probably there was potentially more gender gap, and this is all male, and this is how much you're gonna get now. And this is the 3rd and 4th year, we still have about 20 people in this data set. So it's not huge, but it's not nothing. So it's nice to know that salary progression there. So you will start from somewhere from 50, but there is a potential to go up somewhere between $75,000 to $100,000 here. But granted that as you go more than 6 years, there's not many respondents anymore. So I think what happens here is that it's kind of like after this, it's unclear whether this is the data they will have, but the first 5 to 6 years, you can go from 50 to somewhere between 75,000 is a good guess that you can get. So this is more or less that I have just looked at so far. So if any of you, like including Anne-Marie, Carmen, and Antonia, I'm happy to work on something else. But we have one question, so I'm gonna address that first. So could you speak a little bit about your learning process, especially learning Python and Jupyter Notebook? I'm happy to do that. So this is more or less like the salary data that I'm looking at, but I think we can move on to kind of talking about our experience, my experience, Antonia's experience, especially because the way that I met Antonia is through the CodeUps program. So I taught Antonia a few months ago now, like already like 6 months ago, I think.
Like a year ago, because I started in October.
Yeah, already like a year ago. Yeah, so I think all of us can talk about that particular learning experience on Python and Jupyter Notebook. So yeah, so I'll start, and then Anne-Marie can like start talking about how other people's experience was. So I already had an experience with coding starting in college, which was 10 years ago. So college, I used something called R because I was doing applied mathematics. And I think at the time, R was pretty kind of, it's something that I learned to do like a research assistant work at the time. And then I got into a PhD program, and my PhD program was at a school that is very known for computer science. So everybody was using it's the school for the computer science. So I was exposed to a lot of languages, but because the person I am, I wanted to pick the right one instead of just doing the one that has the most amount of people using. I picked a language called Julia for my PhD thesis. And I had a very hard time during the time because Julia was a new language. It was fast, it was good. I still really love that language. But the problem was, because it's new, there's not many functions that's already pre-written in Julia. So I had to write a lot in Julia. So I think that's when my programming skills was like the most challenged at the time, because there wasn't anything that I could just copy and paste from Stack Overflow as much as Python. So if I wanted to implement something, I had to write it from the beginning. Otherwise, so I had an option of learning a completely new language called Python, or I could write my own function in Julia. So I actually decided to write my own function in Julia. So for that, I think I learned a lot about how the programming works in general. Looking back, that might not have been the best way to learn. Actually, I think it was the best way to learn programming, but it might not be the fastest way to just master data science. So I decided to do the Julia, and then Julia and Python is very, very, very close to each other. So what ended up happening is I just switched to Python after a while because it's just what everybody else used. It's just much more communicative with other developers and other data scientists to use Python. So I switched to Python, and then I ended up doing Python since, but I still use Julia. So my PhD classes, I use Julia to teach, and then for my data science projects, I use Python because it's easier to kind of communicate. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Awesome. So thank you for sharing all of that. Sorry for jumping in. So the first question, yeah, let's make sure also Carmen and Antonia give their input on this. I would love to hear like from, let's start with Antonia, like from your side, like you just, I don't know if you started like learning Python and tools for data science before the bootcamp or like in the bootcamp, but it would be great for people here to hear how do you start from zero to nothing. Mignon, you're still sharing your screen, by the way. Antonia?
Yeah, I started to program in college too, but I started to program in Java, so it's Python is very different. And then I left coding and I started to do special effects. But at some point in special effects, you need to program, to make your own tools. So I use Python for that, and that's where I have my first start with Python. Precisely because I started with Python is why I searched something related to Python, because it was easier for me to search for a job if I already know how to work with the programming language. So it's the opposite from Mignon. I searched for something, some field related to Python, but it turned out that it was that data science, and data science is I love the field, so it was very fluid for me because Python is a very generalist language. You can start by just declaring simple operations and then do a very complex program. So it's very fluid Python for me. Yeah.
Actually, can I ask you a supplementary question to Antonia? So we did like a Python, the first module was to learn Python, and that's for somebody who's never done Python before. So, I mean, you and I both have seen some language before, but what do you think about that module? How did you think about that? And if you were putting yourself into a different person's shoes and starting from scratch, because the module, if you don't remember, we covered conditionals and loops, and so we started with variables, like what the variables are, and then from there we learned what the list is, and then just kind of went from there. Yeah, so I think from that, my personal idea of that Codeup's idea is for us to teach how to think about this logical process of coding works, and then you can learn. But I think it could also be very challenging for a person who's doing it for the first time. And I mean, obviously you're not, but I'd love to hear your opinion about the first module.
Yeah, but I saw some of my colleagues in the course were very challenged with some of the concepts of the programming. Yeah, but it was. We started with very basic things, right? So we started with very basic things, and we were building over these very basic things. It's very fast, the program, so sometimes you are very even me that I used Python before, I was very challenged, but it just in the program we just constructed the knowledge one step over the other. So you have to work, but it's a lot, but it's progressive. Yeah.
So this is it's a hot topic. I would like to hear also like Carmen's opinion from another instructor side. Like, how do you see it? Like, do you require some previous skill to basically just start on coding on Python, or what do you think it's required to basically start and get to an end to an endpoint where you can basically do the data science role?
Yeah. So my belief is that the most difficult skill to learn, it's actually to think in a computer-based logic, and that's it's not related to the language itself. So it's how are you going to tell the computer that you want to do this? And how are you going to tackle the problem? So you first need to understand how to communicate with any language, so to gain analytical skills, and then you can focus on the syntax. For me, it's not important really which kind of language are you most fluent on. The most important thing, are you able to tell in any language that you need that you actually need to create that function, or you need to create those variables, or you need to, compute a package to do something. In my opinion, there's always been like this huge talk about R or Python or even Julia, right? Because 10 years ago, Julia was not really known, but right now it's a trending language, so it's gaining traction over the time because it's simple, it's Python based, and it's quite common. But still, for me, the most important thing is how do you think? Do you have the basic logic to start with? And then you can focus on any language, because at the end, all languages are kind of the same. They just need time, and with some time and some help from Stack Overflow, you will be able to create anything that you need. My personal experience, so I'm kind of similar to Mignon in a way, because when I started my college studies, it was basically, back in the time, R was not really known. Julia was starting to heard about. Python, it was mostly for software engineering, or for it's an object programming language, so it was like for more common things. And then I was exposed to MATLAB and Mathematica, two tools that were for scientific programming specifically. And over the years, as MATLAB, so the kind of that you program in MATLAB, it's quite similar to R, because it's a scientific programming language. It's basically built to create statistical functions and to use statistical knowledge. Instead of Python, that it's more object-oriented, it's more common. You can have Python in your phone if you want. R, it's not exactly the same. So I started with MATLAB, then I moved into R. Somehow it was like my natural movement. So when I finished my PhD, I converted all the code to R just to have some practice. And then over the years, it really depends on what kind of project do you work with. So I've worked with R a lot. I've worked right now, my basic job is to write Python code. And also new languages as PySpark, for instance, that it's in a distributed environment. It's Python based, but on a distributed environment. So as data scientists, you need to know the tools, and you need to use the tool that is best for any program that you're gonna, any problem that you're gonna take. So I'll say it's good to have an open mind about which is the best language, and simply know what's going on. What is the best tool to use for its the problems we're going to tackle, and adapt it.
Awesome. So I know we have some other questions in the Q&A, but staying on the same topic, like you've mentioned a lot of skills and tools and technologies to know, right? Part of this role. But I would like to ask you, like, if it would be to make a list, a reduced list for like people just starting in the industry, like what is a main requirement to know, right? For example, Python was mentioned a lot, the thinking process, in the ability to kind of start coding in different programming language. So what would you say like are the three key skills to have to basically start doing the role?
For me, one of the basic skills is the most important one. It's to have an analytical mind, I'll say, to be able to think critically and to analyze a problem and to kind of reduce the problem to the variables and try to tackle one at a time. So analytical thinking will be my first one. Second will be SQL language, because if you are able to write a query, it's almost all databases right now, and all companies that are tech related are using databases, and normally SQL in any of the flavors. It can be PostgreSQL, it can be MySQL, it can be whatever flavor of SQL, but thinking in query language, it's very, very useful. And then as a plus, I would say Python, because you can apply Python to very different angles to tackle different problems, going through web scraping to, I mean, anything data related, really. So I'll say these will be my three tools, or my three topics or skills that are most important. And luckily enough, we cover all of that in the CodeOps workshop.
Antonia, Mignon, anything to add or to mention for these skills?
I would add to be very skeptical with your data, because it's very difficult to, it's very easy to be drifted to take decisions because you have biases. So you have to be very skeptical with the data and with your biases. You have to be very aware of your biases when you're analyzing things. And this is, I think, this is something that you have to train, not something that you have to do. You can just have, you have to train to be skeptical. Yeah.
Awesome. Mignon, go.
Yeah. So at Coda, we do a lot of training. We talk about it a lot, and we ask a lot of questions. So a lot of the times, I think along with deadline, I think to me, the most important thing is kind of resilience. The reason is because if you're learning, you always have to learn new things. Like, trust me, Python isn't going to be the only language you're going to have to learn, or the SQL or something else. Like you'll have to do a lot more. It's just that at the beginning, I think some famous, like maybe Feynman or somebody else said it, that full has to come first before you have to be expert at something. So at the beginning, almost 100% of the times your code's not going to work. And when your code doesn't work, if you don't have that resilience to go back to understand, like, why didn't it work? What does that mean? To understand the error messages, is that the best way to do it? And you just kind of have to keep going back, and becoming skeptical about the data is the same way. At the beginning, you're never going to be skeptical. So I don't know whether you remember this example that we did, which was, I love this, like a World War II pilot diagram, where it's basically there to describe survivorship bias. And when you look at the diagram, you never know what the answer is. And the answer is very, very not intuitive. And if you have never thought about that before, there's no way that you're going to get the answer for that. And that's the best way to learn survivorship bias. And once you have that, then you start having like skepticism about that. So resilience and being curious, to me, goes hand in hand. Like, if you stop being resilient is when you're stop being curious about things. So if you're really curious, like, why didn't it work? Like, why was the code written this way? Why is the data this way? And keep asking questions, and it's frustrating through and through. And if you don't know how to learn, like, to enjoy that process, I think it's going to be pretty tough. But if you're like willing to learn, I think all of those could be learned pretty, like, overall. Like, I think step by step you can learn things. So I think the most important thing is being kind of resilient and curious at the same time. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Mignon, because the learning process never ends. Mm-hmm. You can have 20 years experience in something, but there's always something new to learn. And you always need to keep asking yourself, what is happening? What can I do better? Can I improve this process? And it's always the same thing. You grow and grow, asking questions. As many questions you arise, there are new questions coming. So actually, as much questions that you ask, there's always another one coming afterwards, right? Like, questioning yourself makes the learning process about getting more questions. And I totally agree that resilience, it's really good point here.
So talking about skills and this ability, like, an openness to learn, right? I think we can go to one of the questions we have in the chat. So the question is, like, how many of these skills do you require to have upfront before taking the data science course? And what is the probability of successfully finishing the course, having more or less of this? I don't know who wants. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can start, but I think Antonia potentially and Carmen could kind of back up. I think you don't have to know Python, you don't have to know SQL, but it's helpful to know if you have ever communicated with computer in a non-graphic design, like graphic interface form. So like besides clicking something, if you ever like wrote something for a computer to do stuff, that's kind of helpful. It doesn't matter whether it was R, it could be even in Excel. Some people are really good at Excel functions, and that's sometimes good enough because the computer essentially works in the same way. So to me, I think what's important is if you had an experience to talk to a computer, it's a lot less frustrating for people to start with, but we don't require a lot of them. And we also have a pre-course materials to assess whether you want to do it or not. So I think we can talk at any point. In terms of what's going to be successful, I don't think it's a pre-required knowledge that makes you either successful or not. We've had students from any stages. Again, to me, I think what makes somebody successful or not is basically how many times did you try to make things work and how much did you understand. So if you put a lot of work into it, I think you were very successful. And Antonia, I know that worked a lot more than what we have promised. Like I think it's not like 550 hours. I think it's like a lot more for you, no? So so I think it's about like how motivated you are, even when it's very frustrating to learn. Because learning is frustrating, like by definition. There's no way that it's not going to be frustrating. You're learning something that you don't know, right? So it's very frustrating, but if you can kind of stick with it, people are pretty successful, I think.
The way that the materials are built, as Mignon commented, it's nothing is required in advance. It's good to have, it's nice to have if you've got some previous experience, but the way that we build the materials is for someone that is starting from scratch. So you don't need to know anything beforehand. But it's really important that you will be motivated over the time, because as Mignon said, it can be really frustrating, right? But I always ask the same. So if someone else has done it, why you can't? It's not impossible. It's not something that you are not capable of doing. You are capable of doing anything you want. You simply need the time and put effort into it. You can do it in some ways, in different way, in one way or another, or you can do it like with some tools or other tools. But at the end, what it matters is that you want to do it. And if you want, you will be able to do it and you will be successful. 100%.
I actually wanted to ask like Antonia about like how support system worked while you were there. Like I know we had TA and sometimes you talk to me, like how did you feel about just like so when you were having like frustrating, like if you're learning for something, like how was the support system? Because you had experience with you and also helping other people and also needing the help.
You're muted.
I lost the first part of the question because my network was, I don't know where was my network. So can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, so I wanted to ask, even if you're motivated, especially if you're motivated, and even if you're motivated, it's sometimes very frustrating to learn something new. So I think it's helpful to have colleagues around to make sure that you can share your experience with. So if you want to comment about your experience with colleagues, I think that would be also helpful for the attendees.
Yeah, we were in our cohort, we were 4 students. And well, it was awesome. I think they were very young because I'm 45, so I felt that they were very young. But we talked a lot, especially during the project, and we helped each other. It was nice to have other people going through the same learning path. Yeah.
Antonia, did you feel like the support system, either the Slack channels or the teachers at the time, did you feel that it was easy to get answers when you need them, or to get like help when required?
Absolutely. Every time I asked, the teachers were there for me to answer things, and yeah, the support was almost immediately. Yeah. I felt it, and also it was not only the support in the theoretical part and explaining things. What was best for me is that it doesn't matter if I made a mistake or if I seem dumb and I didn't understand anything at all sometimes, because the teachers were just they just explained the things to me. They didn't judge me. So this was very supportive, because I was in a position I was very insecure at the moment. So this helped me to be more confident. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you for sharing that experience. I guess like what I'm hearing is that you don't require the skills upfront, and the support system definitely helps between each other, between colleagues, between TAs and instructors. But like for the people that would like to put some effort upfront and prepare, right? Like if they would join the course, like what would you recommend to look over, right? Is there any material or things that you can already start preparing, knowing that they're gonna get into the course?
I think for the sequel, I'll let Carmen take over and PySpark, but it doesn't matter which language, we're gonna use Python. So if you want to be more prepared, you can start with the Python, but just learning how to talk to computer generally with command line rather than clicking. So without graphical interface, can you talk to computers is a one way to think about it. So introduction to Python would be a really good way to deal with it. The other thing that I would do is to read a lot of like projects and statistics. So statistics is an interesting field. So if you want to do like an introduction to statistics, I think it's going to go a long way. But again, you don't really need a previous preparation. I would rather use that time while you're doing the boot camp and just do the activities correctly there. But I'll let Carmen and Antonio also talk about that.
I believe that the best way to start is simply reading. There is a lot of materials in the websites right now. So I invite all of the students simply to go to medium.com or towardsdatascience.com. They are really good places to just start browsing, like simply subscribe to Medium Daily Digest and you receive an email every morning at in your email folder, simply highlighting 3 or 4 topics data science related. And then you can simply start putting the pieces together, just understanding what's going on, understanding what the languages do and so on. I think it's simply that you can start just understanding better what this is all about, what the FAST is about. And if you can start programming something, I would recommend doing SQL. You don't need any experience beforehand, but SQL is quite simple, and there is like a million different sites that you can simply visit and get some tutorials on how to start. All the quick starts, I think, help a lot. So if you're curious about a particular language or particular exercise, simply just Google for a quick start in SQL, and you will get like 5 minutes, tutorial on how to tackle a problem using SQL language. Simply read it so you get familiar with it. I think it's the best way to start.
On that, I think for those of you who are more comfortable with the textbook versions, O'Reilly publications, I'm a big fan. Generally, I think it's mostly free.
Actually, O'Reilly has a lot of good materials, yeah. And the website, it's pretty rich of examples. You can download some coding examples even. So good point there, yeah.
Awesome. Lots of tools. So the information is everywhere, right? It's just about starting, and wherever you start, there's no wrong way to start, basically. I guess that's what we're saying. So changing a little bit the topic, someone is asking about the job searching process after you finish the CodeUp bootcamp for data science. Like, what is how does it look? Maybe Antonia can start here and telling us a bit about her experience that was recent. What were the pains and how did it went, basically?
So I started in very bad dates because I started to search in summer, and in summer the market is not moving a lot. The thing that I found is that there were a lot of positions for senior data scientists, are not many for junior data scientists. But even though I could apply like 10 positions during 2 months. So it was the worst months. And even though I found like 10 junior positions to apply, I think in September got a lot better, but I was already working, so I don't know if how much better it got.
If I may, Antonia, can I ask you how long it took since you applied for your first position till you get an opportunity?
Yeah, my first position, I applied May, and I started to work on September. And in August, and the end of August, I had an offer.
And if I may, how long it took for the whole process to finish, from since you applied to you click onto send CV till you get the offer? How long does it take in that that position?
Let me think. I think a month, because the person who was going to interview me.
I believe you mean.
Sorry, we cannot hear you anymore, Antonia. Something happened with your headphones, I think.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So I don't know where I left.
You're saying about like how long it took the process and the process of actually getting hired with the company.
Yeah, it was a month, but it was a month because the interviewer was on holiday in between. So maybe if it was not the case, maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks. I have to first solve a technical problem, and after that I had a personal interview with the people in the data science team.
Awesome. And also another question, if I may. Did you feel comfortable applying to a particular job that you were not having all the requirements that the position was making? Like, so that you did not have all the skills asked in the position? Did you feel comfortable applying to any of those, or do you rather apply only to those that you felt strongly convinced that you were successfully meeting the requirements?
I was not comfortable applying to the offers with I didn't feel so in every requirement, but I did anyway. So, and one thing that was very I liked a lot about this last position that I finally took is that in the job offer they said apply if any of these requirements fits with you, because nobody fills all the boxes. So that it was, I don't know. I felt very comfortable applying to this position because I felt that, well, maybe I don't know about a lot about BigQuery, but it's going to be okay. I know a lot about Python.
It's exactly like that. Yeah. So I strongly encourage any of you that you're thinking about applying to any job. It can be data science related or not, but especially in data science. The golden unicorn does not exist. So there is no one in the world that actually meets all the requirements that the job positions made. So I strongly encourage any of you to actually apply to a job that you believe it's right for you and you feel motivated about, and that you feel like the company is a good fit for you, rather than just checking if you got 3 years experience of SQL, 5 years programming languages skills, and if you have worked for, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that if you feel like the position is right for you, if you feel like the company is going to be a good fit, apply anyways, because you can always learn. And I take part on a lot of process of the hiring process that we have at Typhon right now, and I always ask the candidate, do you want to learn? Do you think you can learn this? And always the answer is yes, you can learn. I'm not looking for knowledge. What I'm looking is for willingness. So all of us are in the same page, right? Like we are always looking for a person that is willing to learn. And if you are willing to learn, you will learn the tools that we use at the company. It will take a few weeks, maybe a month or 2 months. It doesn't matter, but at the end you will learn that. But we're really looking for talent that is committed to learn.
One thing that I'd like to add here from the career coach perspective, so I get this question a lot, right? When we go into the problem, okay, I'm not getting calls and I'm not getting jobs to apply for. When I hear this, the first question I ask, okay, what's the percentage of skills matching for the job description that you applied for? And it's usually 80%. I'm like, what? Of course, you only have 2 jobs to apply for. So I think you should, one thing that I tell people is, what's the worst that can happen? Apply to everything that it's interesting to them, to you, and let them decide. If they decide to have a conversation with you, they already know, they've seen your CV, they know you don't have the 3 years of experience. It's their responsibility also to make the decision, right? So show up for the interview, have the conversation, ask if you have any worries or in regards to expectation, ask on how do you think I would fit into this role, given the fact that I don't meet all the requirements. Like, ask the tough questions, but don't get yourself out of the race before even giving yourself a chance. I think this is the work that you can do for yourself, right? So keep in mind that there are 2 parts in this process and they have just as much responsibility as you. Yeah, what Carmen mentioned, like looking for potential, this is where companies are looking for when you're just starting in the industry, because everybody starts from the same base, right? Like you all have the same level of knowledge and they know that. So it's about the ability to grow into the role they are preparing for you. And basically them making sure there is the proper environment to offer you to grow, because it's in everyone's benefit for you to grow, right? So yeah, that's one thing that usually convinces people, like what's the worst that can happen? They don't call you back, which is have you back to square one.
But it's not a problem. Every single interview that you make, it's helping you learn how to tackle an interview. So every single step that you do, every single interview that you think, oh, I failed that, you haven't failed. You have learned something. So the next time you're facing the same problem, you won't face it. So don't be shy. Just apply for the job. If the job is not for you, it's not going to happen. And the worst thing is that you will get a no. But it's not a problem. It's good to have that no, because you have learned something in that path, in that case. So when you're facing again that problem, you will know how to tackle it. At the end, so being successful in an interview process, it's a matter of practice, because it's also an art. So you need to learn how to do an interview. And that's why we are here, to just show you a little bit how it's going to be, and to be strong enough to actually do it, or not strong, I'll say, to have the courage to do it. For me, the answer is don't be shy, just do it, believe in yourself.
And just for you to know, from the CodeUp side, like, you will have support, career support into getting into that job, right? So we have a week, like at the end of the program. The last week it's safe for preparing for interviews, right? Like from preparing your CV to your profile to how to say and present yourself in interviews, and what kind of information to share, and how to use your past experience. So all of this is covered, plus, of course, one-on-one sessions with a career coach to kind of solve any doubt or worries you might have. So just to keep that in mind, you're not alone in the process. So besides the support of your instructors and TA and people around you, you also have career coaching support. Hopefully this helps reduce a little bit of the pressure, because I believe looking for a job, mostly when you're changing industry, is a full-time job. So it does take a lot of effort. And I guess at the end, the same with technical skills, it comes back to the more resilient you are and the most effort you put, the faster it's gonna happen. I think this is the only constant that I found in all the working with so many students over this past year. So I think that's where the answer is. Okay, we have one more question in the comment that I want to get to. So the question is, it's about the success rate doing a full-time course or a part-time course. Like, what are your thoughts on that? What is the impact, basically?
I don't think there is a difference between full-time versus part-time course, and I know more about part-time course than the full-time course, because I think I was only involved in one full-time course, and then I'm mostly involved in the part-time. But I think it also depends on how you define success. I've seen students being just promoted rather than changing the jobs because they wanted to be in the same industry, but be a little bit more on the data side. And I've also seen students who have decided to do more research route, and they're very happy with it. But most people are looking for, I think, tech-related jobs. And I think the more and more the CodeUp name is also being on there, I think a lot of companies who are interested in diversity, equity, and inclusion, especially, are interested in talking to us. So there is support, like Anna Marie said. And I think it's probably just going to grow in a way that as a lot more companies are being aware of their diversity concerns, they'll probably be more aware of the fact that there are a lot of well-trained people, hopefully from CodeUp also, that's being funneled. So I think that's a hard question to answer. Anna Marie and I are actually trying to figure out the best version of that answer together. So hopefully we'll have more to talk about in coming months. But I think people are generally more happy than before. But I can ask Antonia and Antonia's potential cohort and how they got together after that. Mm-hmm.
I can talk about my personal experience. I think that the full-time was well suited for the part-time was well suited for me because I was unemployed at that moment, so I could study a lot in the mornings and then go to the course in the evenings. But it depends on your particular situation. The other students in my cohort were working, two were working, so they didn't have the time to study out of the hours of the course, and another of the students was in college, so she had a lot of the work with that. So I think it depends on your particular situation. The material is the same, so.
Carmen, anything to add here? Sorry, just don't want to jump over.
Yeah, no, not really. I believe the materials are there. The only thing that I think it's different is the amount of time that you have to process everything. So in a part-time, it's longer by itself. So it takes a few months rather than the full-time course that can be pushed together, compressed together in I believe it's 8 weeks, 9 weeks, something like that. So of course the learning materials are the same. So the learning curve are more steep. It's more steep in the full-time part. But of course it depends on the time that you have available. If you're working a full-time course, it's going to be an impossible mission. But a part-time course, you can definitely do it in the evening. So we try to have a schedule that it matches with everyone working time. So yeah, I totally agree on that. It depends.
Awesome. Okay, a question I have for you. Any of you can answer me. I'm curious if you know any assumption that people have about this role that is not true.
That's a pretty good question. So any assumption that people does about data science? Yeah, that we do cool things all the time. That's not true. Sorry to say that, but it's not true. So we are a data scientist slash data engineers slash big data engineers slash product manager slash data evangelist slash teacher slash and you can continue the list there. And there are things that you're going to like and things that you're going to dislike, and it's fine. I mean, great part of the job of a data scientist consists in analyzing experience, and I'm not particularly good at it, but I have to do it anyway. So there's always something that you're not going to like, right? But I mean, yeah, we don't do fun things all the time. We do it anyways.
Tough one. Go Mignon, sorry.
No. I was just adding to Carmen, like resilience is
Again,
you need it.
we definitely need it. Yeah.
I was going to say that real work is more analyzing data and cleaning data and essentially torturing data and a bit of machine learning, but most of the job is torturing data. Yeah.
Yeah, you expect yourself just working top-notch algorithms, just programming the last a neural network that comes at some conference. You're not going to do it. Sorry, but yeah, you will probably have some time to do it at some point. But you're mainly you're getting to work with data, and you're going to get your hands messy with it, and you need to do a lot of data gathering, data pre-processing, data engineering, and then hopefully you will get some answers from the data. But it's part of the game. It's part of the trade-off, right? Because as you're doing these things that you might not like as much, you're learning about the business, so you get to get better answers from the data, and you are more capable of giving insights to the business. So you can actually then, when you get the knowledge, program something very cool, a model, or you can create a method, you can create something very, very amazing. But first you need to get dirty, you need to get the hands dirty, and you might not like it as much, or maybe you do. It doesn't really matter, right? But in any case, it's about having fun and enjoying what you're doing.
We have one more question for Antonio in the Antonia in the chat. You mentioned you wanted a change in terms of long time working hours. I can relate. I work in marketing. Do you manage to get that in this current role?
Yeah, it's exactly. I found exactly what I needed. Right now I work from home. I just go to the office now and then, and I have a flexible schedule, so it's perfect for me, and I don't do any extra hours. I can't say if that's true in every company in the industry, but I found it. Yeah.
I think IT, one of the main reasons people get into IT is because of the opportunities and the opportunities for flexibility and growth, and like kind of figuring out your own way of doing things and fitting into that. I think the demand is so high in tech now that we're willing to compromise to anything to have people. So I think this is the place to be, and for basically for finding flexibility and fitting into what you need. But I think very important when you're looking for a job is to know what you need and be able to spot it in your research for the culture of the company, for the job, for whatever, right? In the conversation you have in the interview, because it's your responsibility also to find the right place for you, not just the companies.
I think you get a really good point there, Anna Marie. And every interview is a two-phase direction. So you're interviewing the company as much as they are interviewing you. So don't hesitate in asking questions, because that's part of the process. You need to know the company. You need to know if that fits you, actually. So it's a two-sided interview. So keep that in mind.
Okay, so we're getting close to the end. I have one more question for all of you. As we're talking about getting into this role and starting to grow, and there's a lot of learning and like resilience involved. I would like to hear, how do you individually, like for yourself, measure your growth as a data scientist in the day-to-day?
That's a pretty good question. How do you measure success? For me, what I try to do is try to understand what are my strong points and what are my not so strong points. So rather than just focusing on the good part, I try to also be aware of the things that I'm weakest, and I try to focus some effort and dedicate some effort by the end of the week. Just maybe it can be just 1 hour, 2 hours, but dedicate some time into covering that soft spot. Trying to learn something new, trying to understand better a method, or it can be simply as getting better documentation. But always try to improve a little bit where I'm aware that I'm weakest at.
Awesome. Mignon, Antonia, how do you measure your success or growth as a data scientist?
For me, I think I am constantly changing the map, but I do have a map of this concept is here, the other concept is here. There's tools that's related to this concept, but I have a mental map of all the tools and skill sets that I want to accumulate. And I know that it's probably growing and changing and everything. But once I have that map, I actually, as a data scientist, I probably should use something other than Excel, but I love Excel. And I have a system for all the things that I want to learn. And to me, it doesn't matter whether I get it completely or not. It's just more of a system of like, okay, if I want to understand this particular concept, let's say I never knew SQL, but I want to learn how to do SQL, then I first figure out like, okay, what are the things that needs to be learned in SQL, and have to have like a list of things that I need to do. And then I just kind of check it off as much as I can. And sometimes you're sick, sometimes you're not, sometimes you're burned out, sometimes you cannot. So it's a lot less about like how fast I get. It's more about like I have mental map, and can I check off that list? And eventually it gets checked off, is my hope. But then the map's also growing, so.
It's a never-ending cycle. As much research you do, as much the list grows, right?
What about you, Antonia? Now that you are in the role, like how do you know like you're growing towards? Do you have some expectations like coming with the role, or what has helped you knowing that you're moving forward, basically?
Well, I am not reflecting a lot about that right now. I'm not thinking about that right now a lot, but I do have some objectives, but they are, for now, they are very, they are not very focused on skills, and because I have just started like two months ago. I don't have an answer for that. I really, I need to do something. So I need to make an analysis on something. I just search for the tools to do it, and I try to learn it. Right now, I'm learning and at a very fast pace. So I didn't stop to think on the process.
I'm pretty sure, Antonia, that your company has like a career progression where they make some objectives either by the end of the year or by the end of the period, normally 6 months to a year. So it's a good way to actually stop at that milestone and see if you have improved over that time, and if you match the objectives that normally you agree with your manager. It's a good thing that normally most companies do. To have these checkpoints, so you can actually stop and look back and say, oh, okay, yeah, I did that.
Yeah, we have that measure. In fact, I learned a lot in these 2 months. So, yeah,
that's important. The reason why I asked this question is actually because of that. A lot of people are struggling with confidence. How do I know I'm moving forward, giving up? And it's important to know and have a reflection point and see where you started and where you are. Because if not, you're just gonna, it's harder to keep up, right? So it's just taking the time to also look in the past and not just what else is left to learn, because as Mignon was mentioning, the plan keeps on changing and the knowledge gets more and more. Okay, so that's it from us. We're a little bit over time, so thank you everyone for being here today. Thank you, Mignon, Carmen, Antonia, a lot for answering all of these questions, and for everyone attending and asking questions. I hope you got all the information that you needed. If you didn't, please reach out. We have to our website, to our LinkedIn, whatever. You can reach out to us directly on LinkedIn and ask any questions or curiosity that you might have left, and we'll do our best to come back to you. And that's it. Have a great night and take care.
Thanks, Marie. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.